You are about to journey against the current of contemporary thought and beyond the troubled waters of daily news to the very source of our extraordinary culture. You are going upstream with Cashel and Edge.
Hey.
Hey, Jack.
You know, I was just thinking, this is Loy Edge here, Jack Cashel. You're upstream with Cashel and Edge.
That's the place to be.
But we need no introduction anymore at this stage of our ascendancy.
We're really well known at this point.
At least to our friends and family, immediate friends and family. No.
And various agencies.
Yeah, right, of government who maybe, especially after our last show last week, who may be coming after us. I was thinking about Joe Biden's comments that got him booted from I believe it was in 1988. He was running for president in 1988. Mm-hmm. And he told the story about how his father came up from the coal mines after 8 or 12 hours down in the pits and played football, right? You know what he was doing, of course. He lifted this speech almost word for word.
From an English cat.
That's right. Neil Kinnock, a guy who was a labor leader in Britain. Except, and when his story fell on British ears, it made sense because when they came up after 8 or 12 hours in the coal mines and played football, they were referring to soccer, which is, as we know and they knew, it's a sissy game, right?
It could have been rugby. They got rugby, football, and soccer.
Yeah, but this is football they were playing.
Okay.
Because rugby is a little tougher. Rugby is more like American football. But soccer, they knew, is a game where you just run around in shorts and kick a ball, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're down in a coal mine for 8 or 12 hours, it's no big deal to come up. But for American ears, the notion of being down in a coal mine for 8 or 12 hours to come up and play football just seemed brutal and arduous beyond belief. And as a result of that, Joe Biden had to drop out of the race in '88 in disgrace for plagiarizing, lying about everything else.
It had to be so bizarre to make anybody do any research because everything they say is just accepted, swallowed whole.
Well, yeah, but then
it was that football thing. People were like, what? Wait a minute.
We know football, right?
Yeah.
As you see, I'm wearing my Kansas City Chiefs jacket. I'm a total fair weather fan, by the way. I don't profess to be otherwise. But I was thinking about that. And I was thinking, okay, the rest of the world plays this sissy game we call soccer, they call football. We'll call it soccer for the sake of the show so we don't confuse our...
Because I understand more than half of our listeners are domestic.
Domestic what? Terrorists?
No, just domestic. That we haven't really become that popular in England yet.
What's that, American football?
No, our show.
Oh, our show yet?
Yeah, so our audience is probably familiar with soccer.
Yeah, they're probably more. Most of our audience, we do have an international audience, of course, but the greater part of our audience is still in North America. So we'll use that word for them, for their sake. Okay. Right?
That's good. Fair enough.
The question then is, why have we let ourselves be invaded? The first stage, and we have the WHO, we have the World Economic Forum, we have the globalists. The early stages of that movement was the insertion of soccer into our high schools, grade schools, colleges, neighborhoods.
I was there when it happened.
And what's your explanation for that?
I'll tell you, it was a little weird when it happened because it came into the high school as a not fully official team, but they were kind of given this treatment, like they were able to make announcements about the upcoming game. I'll give you a hint. The team. Now I went to East and we were the Lancers,
right?
But the soccer team was called the Hot Gobs.
So they didn't take themselves seriously.
Well, they kind of did, but not that much, yeah. And the Hot Gobs guys were the rebels of that they would have purple hair today.
Okay, right.
All right. They some of them are still out there trying to tear down the system. writing leftist radical books,
Right.
patting themselves on the back for getting an award from some communist thing. Some of them kind of moderated and became. I still know these guys, right?
Right.
And they worked for community radio. They were down with the struggle. So soccer was not just a game to these guys. It was a political football.
It was a breeding ground for future Antifa members.
It was.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
And so it was real. I mean, it really was like that.
So they backdoored their way into our institutions.
That's right. And these guys normally wouldn't have been on a sports team.
Right.
They weren't jocks
Yeah.
by any stretch of the imagination. So they had a special little niche.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, that's what happened. It was an
And
insurgency.
they probably measured their pitch in meters.
Yeah.
Right. That's it starts. It's little steps, right? And then little steps lead to big steps.
You remember America tried to do that. You remember that? The half-assed attempt.
That's right.
They go, okay, now look, everybody. You've been using this English system for so long. We're going to finally, we're going to stop doing Fahrenheit.
Right.
We're going to do centigrade now.
Right.
So everybody's like, crap. Well, okay. But I guess somebody said it's time to do it. Whoever the leader is that comes up with this crap, that now they do everything. But America wouldn't go both feet. What they did was, with every one of those temperature signs at every savings and loan and bank,
Right.
they would put the centigrade temperature up, but they'd go, by the way,
Yeah.
and then they'd put the Fahrenheit.
Here's the real temperature.
Right. So everybody's just like, okay, what's it? 20 crap, whatever. Oh, it's 78. Okay, all right. So we never trained ourselves. It would have taken 2 days of taking Fahrenheit off,
Right.
and we all would have gone, oh, okay, well, it's 30 degrees.
Well, but it is that, and in fact, it was, I think, a memorable moment in American culture. It was a populist resistance to the imposition of, the metric system came out of the French Revolution. We're lucky we're not calling July Thermidor or whatever.
Right.
No, and we resisted.
We stuck with the imperial.
Right. Exactly. Our old colonial heritage brought to bear. Now, speaking of colonial heritage, and this is something that doesn't get talked about, Britain essentially invented soccer and exported it all over the world.
Did they?
Yes. We're playing by the rules that were formulated in 1863 at Cambridge, right?
Wow.
Now, I shouldn't say we're playing. Other people are playing. I have, as you can probably tell by this time, I'm not a huge soccer fan, right? I've never been accused of that. I'm accused of many things. Here's the problem, and I could solve the problems of soccer in a minute if they let me.
Okay, what do you do now?
Here's the problem. Let me just take, for instance, I think it was the 2006 World Cup. Italy wins, right?
Okay,
And they had to
you
play,
say so.
I just looked this up. I remember thinking about it at the time. They had to play 7 games to get to the championship round, right?
Okay.
And you know how many goals were scored against them in 7 games?
Probably 1.
2. No. One of them, they accidentally scored themselves, an own goal, so they call that. 7 games, 1 goal, right? And so they get into the finals versus France, and it's a 1-1 tie. And they resolve it with the equivalent of a free throw shooting contest. They have like this penalty kick, 5-on-5 penalty kick. And in fact, most of the goals scored during the course of the World Cup are done on penalty kicks. The odds of making a penalty kick where you get to stand in front of the goal, just between you and the goalie, the penalty kick percentage made is higher than the free throw percentages made in the NBA. It's about 85% at the high level. So, and that accounts for a disproportionate amount of the goals that are scored at all, right?
So they're scored punitively.
That's it. I mean, if you don't score punitively, you probably aren't going to score at all. Now, I should say that in games where, like, Brazil plays Korea, they might score 3-1 or something like that. But in games between evenly matched teams, there's almost no scoring. And what scoring there is usually is to a large degree done on penalty kicks. And then when the game ends in a tie and then it goes to overtime, they have a kickoff, which is like the equivalent of like a field goal free throw shooting contest. Imagine an NBA game, right? You're watching NBA. And at the end of regulation time, it's 0-0, right? And then they have an overtime, and it's still 0-0. So they say, okay, get out your best 5 free throw shooters. We'll get out our best 5 free throw shooters.
We'll play a completely different game that kind of has some resemblance to the game that we just played to a draw. It uses the same ball, and humans do it. But other than that, it doesn't have anything to do with it. It's just a shoot. It's a goofy, let's have a demolition derby.
Right. And then you call this, you have your propaganda arm, call this the greatest game in the world, the game that attracts the greatest amount of viewers in the world, right? And I think we're all being tricked. I think it's all just a giant way of one subtle, sneaky way of taking over our country. Next thing you know, there'll be no more baseball because baseball rhymes with B and it rhymes with P and it stands for pool.
Well, I went to a baseball game a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And there is no more baseball,
Well,
by the way. That's some kind of a showbiz extravaganza that I saw.
Yeah.
It didn't even resemble a baseball game. It had dancing girls. It had chorus lines. It had, aerobics and fireworks.
Was this a major league game?
Yeah.
And this year, of course, they celebrated Drag Queen Night at some of the stadiums.
Well, I'm sorry I missed that.
Yeah, Pride Night. In L.A., they had some satanic group of nuns. And as a punishment, God had them lose 3 straight games in their playoff and were out. I don't know if God intervened personally, but maybe like the angel.
God
Archangel.
was on the side of the Diamondbacks this year.
He may be. They're still alive, although it doesn't seem right to me that they should be playing, baseball in October in Arizona. But it's probably a better place to play than, say, Montreal, right? Or Toronto, where they still have a team. Now, what I found is that, and I've been studying this because I have relatives who are big soccer fans.
Really?
Yeah. And,
here in America?
Yeah, and they tend to be on the left. That's just from my early read of it. And I tell them how they could improve the game. And it's easily done. There's only one thing you have to do.
Go ahead. What is it?
Make the goals bigger, right? So when they formulated the rules, the average goalie, and when they did the rules, they standardized the size of the net. The average goalie was about 5'4". Now the average goalie is 6'4" and vastly more athletic. So it's hard to get a ball by him or her, and but they don't do that. So when you look at in the NBA, for instance, you have once players started getting big and jumping and changed the way the game, they had to expand the whole area inside that you couldn't hang around in, right? They had to ban goaltending so that the game remained fluid and the games didn't end in 0-0 scores. If you had goaltending still allowed in basketball, the games would end 0-0, right? Then they have a free throw shooting contest at the end. But they don't. So they adapt it. You don't want to make adaptations that destroy the tradition of the game, just enough to make the game work with the kind of athletes you have.
See, I blame this whole communist thing on the designated hitter rule. I think that started all that crap.
I think you're right. I think that was wrong. See, now baseball is a game that is historically dependent on tradition. And so what you did mattered against what had been done in the past. So it was critical to maintain an equilibrium.
And stats have a much more hallowed position in baseball than they do in the other sports.
That's right.
Statisticians in baseball are just that used to be almost biblical.
Well, yeah, and in fact, even as a kid, if I went to a major league game, you get the scorebook, and you'd keep score.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I mean, I think it was in case someone threw a no-hitter or something, you'd have the memory of it. But, yeah, then that has been and that was why it was so important. And that is why when these guys started juicing up, it was such a sacrilege. You had a national pastime that had, become, to the level certainly not of a religion, but and beyond the cult, though, a national sectarian religion. And then you had guys just violating the rules, just making hash out of them. Whereas but that opens another story too. This is going to be a lot of digressions in this hour, but we rarely talk about sports, and as part of the communist plot to take over America. But it's going on. But designated hitter rule, right? I mean, come on.
That tore it. And then when they went on strike, it took
my
the
gosh.
whole. I mean,
Then they start juicing up. So people ask me if I'm a baseball fan. I say I'm a 20th century baseball fan.
yeah.
20th century, I'm all in. Beyond that, I don't even know anymore. But then the records were so sacrosanct that when in 1961, when Babe Ruth's 60 home run record first became vulnerable because they extended the season to 162 games. They expanded the league, so you had a lot of,
So Maris got the asterisks.
right. And he was harassed the whole season. Now, if Mickey Mantle had beaten it, it would be a little different because he's in the tradition where Maris was just imported from Kansas City, right?
Right.
Maris lived in Raytown, right? Even after he left Major League Baseball. Raytown being, if you're not from here, the working class suburb people make fun of.
By the way, Raytown was where Mama's Family was located.
Mama's Family.
The television show.
Oh,
Mama's Family.
Mama's Family.
One with Vicki Lawrence.
I didn't watch that one.
Because Paul, what's his name, the executive producer, was from the Kansas City area.
Yeah, I know. He was the same guy
Henson.
who produced
Paul Henson, is
right.
that his name?
He also produced the
Beverly
Hillbillies. And so when Jethro called home to Aunt Bodine, you know where he called?
No.
Lee Summit, Missouri.
Lee Summit. Okay. Well, he threw those little gags in there.
Yeah.
And so Raytown is where Mama's Family was.
Right.
But go ahead. Now we're really digressing.
Now I'm going to get into a serious communist plot, which comes up next.
Okay.
You know how many home runs? You know what Babe Ruth's home run record was, right?
Yeah, I don't really remember. But
60. Everyone knows. It's a nice round number. Do you remember how many his career home run record was?
Oh, yeah, 714 or something.
That's right. But that was not a number that anyone really cared about. It wasn't a sacrosanct number. So what happened, I believe, is in the 1973, I could be wrong on that date, but Hank Aaron begins to close in on Babe Ruth's record. And what's the takeaway from Hank Aaron's quest to break Babe Ruth's record today? What do we think of?
I think of the racially charged aspect of it.
That's because that's what the media planted.
Yes.
Right? It was all about the hate mail he got, all the
Right.
Haters, Ku Klux Klanners. And, well, when the vaults were opened in the Soviet Union after the fall of, when the Soviet Empire, what they discovered, and they knew this all along actually, is that part of the KGB's modus operandi was to send hate letters to black athletes and attribute them to white American organizations, like the John Birch Society. Not the Ku Klux Klan, but more respectable ones on the right, typically. They did it for the Olympics, and they did it often and frequently. James Jones, who's a communist of Jonestown fame, he bragged about that. They used to send hate letters to black people and have them have a mailing address of some right-wing organization. So there was standard
Probably half the people writing them were black.
Right, that's right. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. In James Jones' case, because his congregation was largely black,
Yeah.
except for the inner core, which was white. And that's where James Jones' sexual predatory behavior was. That only took place among the white people, curiously. But that's not shocking. That's Jacobin justice again. He used the mob. So I am convinced that and most of the letters came from the North, that was part of the story that we heard daily, and was beat every time Hank Aaron's name came up. Now we look at him as a symbol of racial hate and injustice.
That's right.
I'm convinced that was a plot. When he was still alive, and his ending was tragic, and you know how that was. You know about that?
I don't remember.
It was like a day after he got his jab.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But
boy, this show's not going to air. He was jabbed, criticized by some people, and then he died. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it could be coincidence, but someone tells me there are no coincidences. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I was writing about this because after I got interested in Soviet tricks and the whole KGB enterprise and what they did, how they did it. I said, damn, I also dissected the Obama letters and all of his stuff. I said, I'd really like to take a look at the letters he got, just see if I could find some patterns. And I tried to make my way to that archive, but nothing.
Probably in the Smithsonian Institution, right?
But those doors are
probably
shut.
A wing to it.
Yeah.
Hate letters to Hank Aaron, wing.
And I imagine those doors are shut and will be shut because it's served too useful a purpose in the course of the narrative and rolling out that narrative and telling that story.
Oh yeah,
and it still does. But the patterns wouldn't have been hard to discern because the letters that they sent to the ones where they got caught sending, especially to one Olympics, they use a lot of over-the-top language that no one would use, like racial epithets that have been popular in the 19th century or something, But that was standard practice, standard operating procedure. And why not? It worked, right? Always works. And then it evolves down to our favorite Empire star.
Yeah.
Juicy.
Yeah.
Juicy Smollett, right?
Juicy Smollett. That's
where it comes. And it finally devolves down to. But sport is, I think, should be and has been a holdout against the crushing of the meritocracy and the American way of life.
Well, I don't think it stands for anything anymore. I think that's all been...
It's all been tainted.
Taken out of it.
It's all been tainted, but the essential heart of it continues to beat. So, for instance, you have, as much as they try to polarize, say, football, professional football along racial lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you see a black quarterback, the black linemen are going after him as ferociously as if he were a white quarterback.
Of course.
Because it's on the field, all of that stuff disappears.
Of course.
And then the media will jabber about it.
Just like in the trenches.
Right. That's right. And that's why it's important to...
It shows how trivial all this racialist bullshit is.
Right.
It really doesn't matter. It only matters to the Jacobins with their, manipulation of the media that they control completely.
Yeah. So what do you think about the NFL now playing games in Europe? What do you think's behind that?
I don't know. I don't follow that crap. I don't care about it at all.
Well,
I'm gonna ruin this discussion by saying I don't give a half a crap.
Okay. Well, there's a couple things it does, and now actually now I'm getting a little sillier. One thing it does is it extends the Sunday viewing, right?
Right.
I think they're more concerned about getting hours in the morning So if it's being broadcast at noon or 3 o'clock in Frankfurt, Germany, it's 9 o'clock.
They've got to keep everybody glued to the bread and circuses.
That's right.
As much as possible.
And if you do it on Sunday morning, you can take them out of church.
That's a critical deal.
Right.
Get them out of those churches.
And they're also obviously trying to expand their worldwide market base for merchandise purposes, So when I have my Chiefs jacket on here, and I was in Ireland last summer, and I swear every day someone came up to me and said, "Oh, Kansas City Chiefs, we love your quarterback, Mahomes, and you got a good team. Go to the Super Bowl," every day. Every day, someone, right?
Well, there's a large group in England,
right,
that watches the Chiefs. That's a big Chiefs. It's a giant organization of Chiefs fans, and one of the Chiefs ex-players is a friend of mine. Was telling me that they offered him a contract to be one of the hosts on that thing.
Huh.
And he was looking into it, but he said there's a huge fan base in Jolly Old for the Chiefs.
Oh, there is, and for NFL in general, but the Chiefs in particular, probably because they like teams that win, I guess. And the Chiefs have been winning consistently for 10 or so years.
I don't think it's their affinity for Kansas City. It's probably the Chiefs.
Yeah, and yet Kansas City is such an emblematic city. I mean, it's like America. It says heartland, whatever.
It would appeal to England.
Right, that's right. And if you're in a city like Birmingham or Manchester, or where you're not London, right? Just like every place in France is not Paris.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, well, from the Parisian point of view, every place not there, it might as well be in friggin' Quebec. It's like to them it's just out. People that you don't have to care about because they're not real people. But no, I am. Did you see we have a new soccer stadium?
Yeah, I heard about it. It's a female soccer stadium.
Right. Female and in the general, larger sense of the word.
Yeah.
People who identify as females.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that, to me, that was a new thing, to have a gendered stadium.
Right.
I'd never seen that before. Now, granted, I do not pay a lot of attention because I've spent maybe 5 uncomfortable hours within a stadium this decade.
Yeah.
And I have no interest in going into a stadium for any reason, and I don't care about them.
Right.
But when I saw that was a specialized, gender-exclusive stadium, I thought that was a little bit wrong-headed and ridiculous. But
especially in an age when we're redefining gender.
That's it. It's like, is this for lady soccer for women, or is it lady soccer for everybody?
And and that is the high irony of building a gender specific.
Yes.
Here's the weird thing. The same year we build a gender specific soccer stadium, we build an airport with gender inclusive bathrooms. Right. So when you read about the airport, and we have a new airport here in Kansas City, by the way, new and bland and and unlovable, but the prominent bathrooms are gender inclusive, and they're building that
humiliation rituals.
Yeah, I didn't go in one. My wife did. They are most prominently located. So if they're at the intersections of
it's
the
what
long
everybody
corridors.
talks about,
right? And from a female perspective, if you go in one, most women aren't used to going into bathrooms and having pee on the seats, right?
Well,
that's for many women a new experience.
Unless you have ever been in a
married.
domestic situation, then you know that's all they think about.
No, but you're well trained. I tell you, if you're even if the child is well trained,
right?
Lift up the seats. All right, okay, all right. Now it's put down the seats. You have to lift them and put them down. You've got to do all that work, right?
Right.
But in the gender inclusive bathrooms, they just have stalls.
Yeah. Oh.
And for some reason, Joan was telling me they take up twice as much space as a normal stall. And maybe so you can change from male to female, whatever you need changing room. So, in other words, it's more expensive to humor this whole mania, right? Not only that, of course, the doors have to come all the way down to the floor.
So you can do anything in there except smoke.
Yeah, right, exactly. Cigarettes.
Yeah. But, hey, no, it's okay. It's just weed. I've got eye trouble. Okay, cool. Just don't smoke any cigarettes.
Yes. Now the bathrooms for now they're described now as, you would used to be like men's room, ladies' room,
Yeah, I remember that.
Now they're just called gender-specific bathrooms collectively.
Just flows right off the tongue.
Gender-specific and gender inclusive, right? Mm. And they're down at the end of the corridor. So let's say you get off the plane and you got to go to the bathroom. You turn towards the exit, and there's the gender inclusive one. Otherwise, you got to go the reverse direction and go the gender specific.
So every guy my age, as little as he wants to go to the mixed gender bathroom, is going to take it.
If it's there.
He ain't going to make it to the other end.
But there's lines because it's so centrally located,
Oh, boy.
And then you're right. We have the irony of having a female-oriented soccer stadium right next to a gambling casino. I don't know if that's.
I wonder what the bathrooms are marked in the female soccer stadium. I wonder if they have all-inclusive bathrooms. It would be funny if it was just men's and women's in that stadium. Wouldn't it?
I wouldn't be surprised. It was done pretty quickly, I will say. They put it up in about 20 minutes, and it looks.
That went up faster than that Ferris wheel.
Yeah, we have a Ferris
wheel.
What
the hell's that?
No one knows.
Stuck it where there's nothing else. It's like. You stuck that in a place where some guy spun his car out in 1986, and that's the last thing that happened in that ditch.
Right.
But now there's a Ferris wheel.
We have a Ferris wheel that overlooks an interstate and an industrial park. It's just and an old Hispanic neighborhood. It's pretty cool.
Made me think of the old Glaziers family.
Yeah.
That's what they wanted to do, build that Ferris wheel down by the river.
Yeah.
And now they're all gone, but we've got the Ferris wheel.
Well, and just to digress, this is a show dedicated to digressions, by the way, so bear with me. But did you ever read the book The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson? It's actually a good book. And it talks about this mass murderer who's running through the streets of Chicago while they're planning the World's Fair of, I think it would have been maybe 1892, the 400th anniversary of the United States, of Columbus, whatever. I think that was it. I could be wrong. It was around that time. And they had just built the Eiffel Tower for an exhibition in Paris. And so the Chicago people were thinking, what can we do to rival the Eiffel Tower? And then you're building up to this. You're not sure. And then it's part of the mystery is, what are they going to do? What are they going to build? And then they hire an engineer named Ferris, right? And then he said, voila, of course. They build the world's first Ferris wheel. Of size, first Ferris wheel, period. And that's where it derived from. But getting back to soccer again, and women's soccer, we were treated to a spectacle this year in which a good chunk of American citizens were rooting for the opposition in the female World Cup.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But a most unlikable front person they had.
Right. Megan Rapinoe is her name.
Megan Rapinoe.
Who I think was just bumped from the Victoria's Secret catalog. And she's, of course, pink-haired, lesbian. I mean, she's all the intersectional things come to bear in the embodiment of one person. And she was so toxic that people were openly rooting for. I was rooting for Sweden. I've never rooted for Sweden for anything in my life, other than I liked their COVID policies. And it's a shame because that's what happens to sports when you bring in this foreign imported sport, and then you put people embed them in this system, and they create.
Well, you really had the experience there that the left has been experiencing for hundreds of years of cheering against America.
That's right.
Only they would look at things, they would cheer against us in things like war.
Yeah.
And and all this stuff. But you had that feeling. How did it feel? Cathartic?
No, not really. I would much rather root for America.
Mm-hmm.
And having grown up in the Cold War, as you did, when the Olympics came, I was, beside myself and with patriotic
verve.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So race was never an issue.
No, it wasn't even when Jesse Owens
No,
ran.
no, or
I mean, except for the Germans.
right, right, and
And Jim Thorpe and all that stuff. It's like nobody said, no, we're not pulling for you because you're not like us.
no. In fact, the fans were hugely in favor of Jim Thorpe and the Carlisle Indians. They had turned out great crowds. They would root for them, right? And Americans rooted for Jesse Owens. My first memories of watching Olympics, I didn't, and I lived in a world where the color was an issue, but not when it came to national sports, not when it came to the Olympics. I remember Muhammad Cassius Clay winning the Olympics in 1960, and guys like Rayford Johnson winning the decathlon. And no, it was the time when you overlooked all of that sort of thing.
I don't remember any of that stuff being. I mean, I love the Cardinals of that era.
Yeah,
which was Flood and Gibson
right.
and Cepeda. I mean, there weren't too many white guys.
Yeah, I was a Dodger fan as a kid, which was the blackest team in baseball. I was a Boston Celtics fan, which was the blackest team in the NBA. And yet, to that point, there's a documentary on Netflix about Bill Russell, who was the most successful basketball player in NBA history. I don't know if he's the best, but he's most successful. He won 11 NBA championships. You're doing something. But all it was about was poor Bill Russell.
Yeah.
And I find myself fast forwarding through the incident where someone called him a name, or
right.
Or he didn't win the MVP because he was. Now stop this! I want to say I want to relive the games that he played when I was a kid. When I was watching him and rooting for him. I knew they had 4 black guys on the starting 5, but it wasn't jammed down our throats at that time as something that we should feel. And another interesting case in that regard was the case of, you don't follow basketball as closely as I do, but I believe it was in 1965 or 4. There's a team out of Texas Western started 5 black players in the NCAA championship, right?
Okay.
And it was now it's like celebrated and memorialized, but they won. They beat an all-white team out of Kentucky. But the year, in the 3 or 4 preceding years, teams with 3 and 4 black starters were winning the NCAA.
They just wanted to make hay out of it.
Right. And so they've imposed the foreignness, this whole foreign Jacobin element, imposed it on our sports, and are trying to pull it down. But where they will not succeed is imposing any kind of diversity regime on the playing field. That's where it all breaks down.
You're right.
So we have an NFL, for instance, that's 70% black. I have yet to hear, a person complain about that disproportion, because there's no Chinese, there's no Japanese. There's a handful of, there aren't 2 or 3 Mexicans in the whole league, right? There's no women. There's surely no handicap. And that is in a sense, the last line of resistance. So they corrupt it around the edges. They give us Megan Rapinoe. They give us Colin Kaepernick. They give us knees at halftime. They have ways of subverting the game without subverting the actual game.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a good point.
Turn us against it,
Well, they certainly add a lot of Well, when I went to that baseball game and I saw that stuff going on, all that extraneous hoopla, it all seemed like a lowering of it to me.
That's right. It's like they're trying to pass it off as like circus, and debasing of the game itself should be sufficient. And if it's a little deliberate, a little longer than like football or whatever, let it run.
Well, football, one of the things that's happened that I've noticed a lot is the females that embrace football now.
Yeah.
It's almost like they've given up after so many years of coercion, and they've just said, "Okay, damn it, I will go buy the oversized sweatshirts and I'll decorate." And yeah, we never missed the Super Bowl and all that. I still can't adjust to that because when I was a kid, that was the domain of men.
Right.
And that's where men did their trivial. They chomped on cheap cigars and sat out at the stadium and drank Falstaff. They smoked Roy-Tans. They watched that game.
Right.
They stop at the Majestic Steakhouse and play a couple games of gin rummy and go home.
Right.
Now it is really it's more like a glorified high school deal where the whole family's involved and coolers and cookouts, and they've achieved one thing. They have taken the whole family away from the church for the entire day.
Right. They have done that.
I mean,
and what they and that's probably why we have mass on Saturday nights now. I mean, literally, really. And but what the thinking among women is, and I've heard people talk about this. Not that I understand women, I'm not going to say I do, but I've overheard conversations and stuff, is that women think they make themselves more attractive to men by being sports fans.
yeah,
I don't think
see
that's
that.
true. I think it's the opposite of true.
Well, I'd agree.
Because when I listen to women talking about sports, especially male-dominated sports like football, they just don't quite get it, right? It's like, I hate to say it, like listening to them talk about politics sometimes. There's some element that's some natural male aggressive element that's kind of missing from the equation, the calculus.
Well, occasionally, some women pull it off so well that they become national sportscasters.
Well, the problem is they don't.
Are they any good?
No.
I don't watch them, so I don't know. But I see it sometimes on TV. I go, well, there's a woman up there sitting with these guys talking football.
What they can do halfway well is, I can get thrown off the show for saying this halfway well, but they could do on-the-field interviews, which are brief and short and not in very much depth. The problem is that they're talking to people who are sometimes 2 feet taller than them. In the booth, they never sound quite right, in my humble opinion.
Okay.
In any sport other than maybe golf, which is.
Well, then I'm not disappointed that I'm missing it.
No,
but I'm
don't
missing
be.
it all.
And they won't put them in a booth on a major sporting event. You're not going to hear that for a long time. You may never hear that, and it's not because they don't know the sport so much as that they just don't get the rhythm of talking to men.
Well, then why are they doing it, Jack?
Well, why are they putting them in cockpits? Why are they putting them in lunar orbits? I don't know. Because we're being forced to do it. Where you'll not see them, though, is on an NFL roster.
That's right.
Not even close, right? Sometimes you'll see, and they'll celebrate these instances where a woman does kickoff for, Division 12 college football team, and we see the ball roll down the field about 8 yards. It's embarrassing. It's do what you do well. You don't want me out there, playing in the Masters. And you can put a green jacket on me. At the end of the day, it doesn't make me a champion. And that's where we are. It's just we give everyone a green jacket, and they get to think that they're a champion for a while. Okay, last question for you. What was the most memorable sporting event you ever watched or attended?
Well, I was there in my young mind, it was an exciting day to watch Campy play all positions at the Municipal Stadium.
Roy Campanella.
Campy Campaneris.
Oh, Campy Campaneris. I was going to say.
Dagoberto Campaneris.
Okay. Your Campy is different from my Campy.
That's right.
That is something.
He, it was one of the many tricks that Finley pulled.
Yeah.
To gin up interest in a team that never finished above 6th place or 7th place.
And he and
He was the owner.
Bill Veeck were the champions of gimmickry.
Gimmickry.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, in Kansas City we had Harvey the Rabbit come up from the ground and hand as a statue, hand baseballs. We had the Kelly green and gold. We had the white kangaroo shoes, first ones to do that. We had sheep or goats out in the outfield, grazing. All kinds of crazy stuff going on. Anything but good baseball.
And then you get a good player in Kansas City, you trade him to the Yankees, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's farm team.
We had a bunch of over-the-hill guys that would come. We'd get Jim Gentile and Rocky Colavito after they were done. But I really don't know other than that. I mean, I'm sure it'll come to me after I walk out. I probably saw the only shutout. I don't know.
Well, I would say my most memorable is watching Taylor Swift cheer for Travis Kelce in the.
Oh yeah.
What do you think of that?
She's cute. He's big. He's good. He's handsome and she's cute, and she sells a lot of records, and he's doing well on football.
Well,
how's that? That's pretty deep. That's about how deep I go on that one.
Yeah, I have my historical memory goes back a little further than yours, but it is probably the most memorable sports media
since Babe Dietrichson.
No, since Joe and Marilyn, right?
Oh yeah, Joe
DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe, and the problem that Kelce, presuming, let's say they get married, which I mean they just built a $6 million house or bought one as a hideaway for Taylor Swift, who's absurdly popular, and she comes to the Chiefs games now, and the cameraman continually flick back to the booth after Kelce does everything,
right?
Which has made Travis Kelce now the single best-known NFL player in the world.
Is that right?
He picked up 400,000 new Twitter followers the first Taylor Swift game. I mean, Patrick Mahomes now is who's Patrick Mahomes? Is he? Oh, he's Travis Kelce's teammate. Right? But the problem comes, and I'll close on this historic projection. The problem with Joe DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe is that she was ascending and he was declining, right? It was like when Frank Sinatra marries Ava Gardner, or in the classic plot of, what's that movie? They made it 4 times. Oh, Judy Garland, blah, blah, blah. I'll forget it.
Wow, you're asking me for movie titles. You're in deep stuff there.
I know. It's the aging movie star marries the young ingenue, and he ends up committing suicide. And I'm just having a blank right now. But it's I don't think this is going to end well. I'd like to see it end.
Joe was a dog.
Joe DiMaggio, yeah, he was not a good husband. He goes back to my mother's old adage about Jews and Italians. Jews, good husbands, bad wives. Italians, good wives, bad husbands.
That's what your mom just wrapped it all up in a nutshell there.
She had ethnic nutshells of all sorts lined up for us as children, so we could just get the nutshell and eat it rather than having to experience all this in our whole life.
We should have put her in the UN and let her do a little talking.
Well, I tell you what, she is in my book, Untenable, the true story of white ethnic flight from America's cities, and it's not too early to think about your Christmas presents, so get that in there.
That book will fit perfectly under this tree.
Right, and it's
under the holiday tree.
Under our Christmas tree in our stores. It is the perfect book, though, for people who experienced what we experienced, to explain their feelings to people who never did. So.
Well, I got to tell you, you remember how I talked about Fairway, growing up in Fairway, and how everybody was so close, and it was familial.
Yeah.
I had lunch with the neighbor from across the street a couple of days ago. She called me to tell me she was coming in town, and we had lunch. and I met her in 1959, 57,
Yeah.
when we moved in.
Right.
She was the little girl across the street, and she would come see my mom once in a while when she was in town over the years. But there we were having lunch, and we hadn't lived together in that neighborhood for 60 years. But we were having lunch and talking about old times.
Yeah. And it's rare you get that opportunity. And
that's how tight that neighborhood was.
Yeah, yeah. I found that out because for doing my book, I spoke to 50 people I haven't spoken to in years, which is really heartening, because we're beginning to lose them, I used to go to people's parents' funerals. Now I'm going to people's funerals, which is not a good sign. But anyhow, on a positive note, some things are eternal. First, I should say, as a closing note, I will say, soccer, make your nets bigger. Come on, it's all it takes. You could have games in like 3-2. They don't all have to end 0-0. And especially a shout out to Real Media here, who are kind enough to let us come in here. And it's a great place if you want to do something like we're doing, or if you want any kind of full service video needs or audio needs. I've worked with these guys for 25 years, so they're good people. And
absolutely,
their minds, their heads are in the right places. So, Hey, Loy, good to see you again.
Thanks, Jack.
See you next week, and we'll have to talk about having a new date in between that. Our second date. We'll have to talk about that, but we'll keep that off the air.
Okay, I'll be thinking about it. I don't want to go to a sporting event.
No. We'll take you someplace that you might enjoy.
Okay,
yourself.
Thanks, Jack.
Like a golf date, So.
Yeah, that's hardly sports, but that's what I like.
Hey, we'll see you next week, guys. This is Upstream with Cashel and Edge.